Welcome to the regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors for Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. Because of COVID-19, we are still acting in accordance with Alameda County Health Orders and the Governor's Executive Order N2920, suspending portions of the Brown Act so that this meeting can happen by teleconference only. In compliance with those orders, we have no physical location provided today. We'll keep doing this as long as the state or local public health officials impose or recommend social distancing. So probably be a while longer. The committee and the Legislative Human Resources Committees both met this morning and will report out under item 15. If you're eating lunch, please mute. All directors, including myself, are participating via teleconference. Madam Secretary, if you would please call the roll.
Directors Coleman.
Present.
Katz.
Present.
Lenny.
Here.
McIntosh.
Here.
Mellon.
Present.
Patterson.
Present.
President Young.
I am here. We have no announcements from, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I left out a part of the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh well. Okay. We have no announcements from closed session. And we're now on to public comments. I see what's going on. There's some. If I get disconnected, I'll join back in. No. Okay. I was on both meetings. All right. If there are members of the public calling in who wish to speak on an agenda or a non-agenda item, the secretary will take your name and I will call for you in an alphabetical grouping and ask that you please state your name, affiliation, and if applicable, and the topic that you'll be addressing. You'll get 3 minutes to talk, but I have the discretion to amend that time based on the number of speakers. Secretary will let you know when it is your turn to speak and when your time has concluded. If you are not speaking under public comment but are on the line, please mute your phone as long as it's not a music on hold situation to minimize background noise. Or if you do have music on hold, consider instead joining on the audio live stream on our EBMUD website. Okay. Is there anyone on the line for public comment with the last name beginning letters A, Apple, through F as in Frank? Okay, G for
Hi, this is Lindsay Edelman.
through L.
I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you, and you said Lindsay Edelman?
Okay, thank you. Yes, Lindsay Edelman, Water Conservation, AFSCME, Local 2019 E-Board. I wanted to make a public comment on a non-agenda item.
Okay, so I'll put your name down, and once she continues calling the alphabet, I'll call you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else in A through F? Okay. Last name beginning with the letter G through L, as in Larry.
Eric Larson, President AFSCME Local 444. I'd like to speak on consent item number 6.
Okay. Anyone else in G through L? Okay, M as in Mary through R as in Robert. S as in Sam through Z as in zebra. Okay, we will, let's take our public comment under the non-agenda items.
Lindsay, your time is starting now.
Hi, everyone. This is Lindsay again. I just wanted to make a comment that at least today I've been attending all of the different committee meetings and everything, and it's been very difficult to hear and really laggy. So I'm really concerned that people who want to attend this meeting but can't physically, especially in the general public, that they're really missing out just because of the lack of connectivity. It's been really frustrating for me today, and there's been a lot of things that I've been wanting to listen to on the different agenda items, and I'm just hoping that that this will improve. And I wanted to see if I could get any updates on how improvements will be made so that we can hear better and see what's going on and have better access, not just for our employees, but for the general public. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Clifford, could we have and this is a topic I've been interested in as well, I think other board members too, if there could be an information memo updating us on the effort to upgrade our ability to more actively involve members of the public than the Microsoft Teams platform allows.
I'll let Risha respond to that.
I'm actually working on obtaining a Zoom webinar license, and our IT staff is working on that for me, and hopefully we'll be able to pilot using Zoom for our board meetings and including the public in those meetings, but as participants, not as panelists. There's something you can do in Zoom webinar where you have more control than we currently have in Microsoft Teams. And I'm hoping to be able to do that either at the first meeting in September or the second meeting in September. And so you will be receiving a memo on my efforts, our efforts. And I'm just waiting for staff to get me what I need to test the webinar feature of Zoom and ensure that when we have a meeting, I'm not fumbling and I know what I'm doing.
That is great to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we will now move on to the consent calendar. There's 12 items for consideration. I am going to pull item 12, and it sounds like we are going to pull item 6. Are there any items board members wish to move from consideration on consent calendar?
Move the remainder, Marguerite.
Second, John.
Okay, so items 1 through 5 and 7 through 11 maybe have been moved and seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes. Okay, item 6. Clifford, can we get you want to do presentation and then public comment?
We don't have a presentation prepared for item 6. Maybe we can hear Eric's comments.
Okay.
Eric, your time is starting now.
Thank you, Clifford. Thank you, President Young. Thank you, Board. I am speaking in support of this technical consulting contract. Your advanced treatment plant operators at the Richmond Advanced Recycle Expansion Project need this technical process performance information and specialized technical training to continue to provide Chevron with custom specified tertiary treated ultra high purity water for their high pressure boilers produced by microfiltration and reverse osmosis from secondary treated wastewater effluent from West County. And so we encourage you to adopt or approve this agenda item. Thank you.
So nice to hear. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Frank.
Seconded by Director Patterson. Roll call, please.
Directors Coleman,
Yes, I had to turn mute off.
okay. Katz,
Unmute myself.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes.
Biden just chose Kamala Harris.
That's what I just saw.
Is
Really?
that right? All right.
Well, yeah, I hope so. Okay, let's, fittingly, I guess, move on to item 12, which is, today, we have a resolution before us to recognize the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, granting and guaranteeing all American women the right to vote. Although we should keep in mind that there were many laws in place that kept Black women from voting after 1920 and until the passage of still today, the Voting Rights Act, which we just celebrated last week, the 55th anniversary of, which increased access to voting for African Americans in the United States. Many of the women in the National Women's Suffrage Association, thousands of them, were important figures, and sadly, not all of them were the most progressive when it came to understanding the role of structural racism in our society. Nevertheless, in honor of this milestone, we want to recognize some of the California women and local women that were essential in that, including Clara Shortridge Flouse, who wrote the successful amendment to the California Constitution, allowing women to enter any lawful business, vocation, or profession. Phoebe Hearst, who became the first women regent of the University of California, Berkeley, and founded the PTA. The architect Julia Morgan, who we're all familiar with. Oakland native and businesswoman Lydia Flood Jackson, who began to lead the statewide campaign to secure voting rights for Black women in 1910. And in 1911, Alameda resident Clara Elizabeth Chan Lee was the first Chinese-American woman to register to vote in the United States following the passage of California's Proposition 4 9 years before the passage of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. She could vote in California, but many women were still denied the right to vote elsewhere. These women changed our country, and we stand on their shoulders, most notably nominating the first Black American woman to the second highest office in the United States, apparently, today. So with that, I need a motion to adopt this resolution.
One comment, if I might, Marguerite.
Yes.
So part of this process is we need to recognize that for all of this progress, it was Wyoming Territory that gave women the first right to vote anywhere in the continental U.S. So this is as much a salute to the backcountry folks of Wyoming as to presidential nominee Biden. And so I would move the resolution.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes. Okay, we will now move on to determination and discussion, beginning with Marlene Dumaine and our legislative update. Take it over to you.
Thank you. We have a written legislative report for you with 2 bill position recommendations, and then I have a state and federal update that is now shorter, thanks to Director McIntosh. Thank you for the update on the vice president pick. On the ledger report, the first bill is Senate Bill 1103. This is a workforce training bill, and this would build on an existing program that's in statute, and it would provide $25 million in grants upon appropriation by the legislature to help people participating in high road training partnerships participate. Those grants would go to support services like childcare, transportation, etc. The grant amount for an individual would be limited to about $5,000 a year. And we were looking at this as of particular interest to East Bay MUD. One, because we think this would be helpful within East Bay MUD service area for the community. And secondly, because this could support participants in the Jewish Vocational Service and Bay Work Partnership program that East Bay MUD participates in. With that, we're recommending a support.
And Marguerite, this is John, if I can interject. On our Ledge Committee today, we both supported SB 1103, and in addition to the next bill that Marlene is going to talk about, Senator Harris's bill on Senate Bill 418 on a 3-0 vote.
Okay. I have one question on the high road bill. So that isn't specifically to board participants, those individuals who are in the grant-funded high road training partnership programs. It's a wide swath of training programs that are eligible, I gather, since the Jewish Vocational Services program is not a high road training partnership program.
I think I got your question. There's some background noise. I can hear some dishes.
Somebody's clanking around in the kitchen.
So
the Workforce Development Board has a program called the High Road Training Partnership Program, which makes grants to labor management funds to offer workforce training programs. This would enable participants in those programs as well as other high road partnership like programs to avail themselves of support. Am I understanding that right?
Our understanding is that this is for the participants in the high road training partnership programs.
Okay.
And I think there's either 7 or 8. One of them is water. And it's actually been one of the...
There? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I didn't realize Bayworks was one of the HRTP programs. That's great. Okay. Do we want to vote separately or together? Let's get the next one, and then it sounds like we'll do them together.
Okay. So the second one is Senate Bill 4188 by Vice President nominee Harris, the Water for Tomorrow Act. This is very similar to Representative Huffman's Future Act that you took a support position on earlier in the year. And so this is basically the Senate approach that incorporates much of what the House is looking at. The reason in particular that we like this is it recognizes, in terms of funding and protections, fisheries that are deemed commercially and recreationally important. When we look at prior vehicles like the WIN Act, they focus on endangered species, and that leaves the McCollum fishery out. And so as we talk about things like cross-channel gates issues, it's really important that this commercially, recreationally important piece is part of the discussion. And this is a result of our conversations with Representative Huffman, and we view this as very helpful, particularly if we get into lame duck and we get into those policy conversations. We now have two vehicles that basically recognize the moke fishery as important. There are potential funding mechanisms in here, which would be helpful, but our primary issue here is that moke fishery protection. And so we are recommending a support on this.
And Marlene, if I can interject, I did ask that we get a confidential memo regarding Harris's bill and how that may impact the voluntary agreements and how that may come into play.
Okay.
I'll move the two bills.
Okay. Moved by Director Coleman, seconded by Director Patterson to support both of the legislative recommendations brought by staff. Any further discussion? Okay, let's get a roll call vote.
Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Sorry, I'm out of here. I'm revving up my motorcycle. I'm out of here.
Participant line
I'm
muted.
sorry, that's outside my door.
okay,
That
so,
was a chainsaw.
right, we heard Katz, I'm sorry, Director Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes, and I'll
Pat-
turn off my sound.
Patterson,
Yes.
and President Young.
Yes. Frank, I didn't realize you were so close to the street. Okay, I believe that's all we have under the legislative update.
Would you like an update on state
yeah.
and local issues?
Yes, please.
Okay, starting with state, the legislature's back. They're in the final month of a 2-year session. Their adjournment is midnight on August 31st. And as you know, this has been a wild year, and there have been unplanned breaks. There were COVID cases within the Capitol. They came back on the 27th. Both houses have culled the bills, and we will probably see more bills going away over the coming week or so. Right now, there's about 500 bills to consider, and they're still making their way through policy committees and through appropriations committees. They've adjusted their schedule to try to get everything done. So the Senate at least is meeting with policy committees on the weekends, and they've got policy issues, they've got budget issues, and it's just a very dynamic situation right now. So we expect to see a lot of excitement over the next few weeks. At the federal level, I will skip the bit about Kamala Harris. On the relief package, we've been talking about package 3.5 for a while. I'm sure you've heard that negotiations stalled, and on the 8th, President Trump issued 4 executive actions. There's 1 executive order and 3 memoranda, and these don't replace the relief package. Nothing in these actions replace the key issues of debate under the relief package. Things like additional state and local government assistance, rate assistance, payroll tax credit, etc. For now, both of the houses have left Washington, D.C., but they are subject to callback, and they are expected to work through the month of September. So at a minimum, they have to address the budget. The House has been looking at spending bills. However, the Senate is expected to be gridlock on spending bills. So it's an election year. We're probably going to see a continuing resolution that will take us through the end of the year or into early next year. As far as relief, I always say never say never until it's over. As more impacts from COVID economically become clear as we get closer to the election, we may see more willingness to reach a deal. So far, the House Democrats have gone from a $3.5 trillion approach to a $2.4 trillion approach. They're really showing a willingness to negotiate here. So stay tuned on that. On stimulus, the bill that the House Dems released for stimulus was H.R. 2. That was a month or so ago. Right now, the timing on any stimulus is probably next year under the next administration, particularly if we see a change with the administration in the election. The last point I wanted to raise is social equity. There has not been much activity on that front since we last spoke. We're looking to lame duck or next year, particularly if we see a change in the Senate and the administration. And that's my update.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from board members? Okay, let's move on to the general manager's report. And I think first up, we have an update on the Racial Justice and Equity Project.
Yeah, so it's going to be on the Racial Equity and Justice Project as well as the Diversity and Inclusion Master Plan. This is going to be similar to the presentation that was made this morning at the Ledge HR meeting, and Derry Moten is going to make the presentation.
Good afternoon. We're going to provide you with an overview of where we are with both of our projects. So background information to refresh everyone is that on June 23rd, you adopted a resolution that contained 10 principles of operation and 8 strategies for addressing racial discrimination specifically. And this update is going to provide you with some overview on where we are status-wise with this project. So we divided the project into 3 phases, with phase 1 being working toward immediate actions, things that we found that were actionable immediately. Phase 2 was then working on near-term actions that were not directly related to the Diversity Inclusion Master Plan process. And phase 3 was working on long-term actions that we saw had crossover with the Diversity Inclusion Master Plan in ways that were, and specific things that we feel like could be blended together with actions that we would take as a result of the work of the Winters Group. So we've adopted a couple of working strategies for working on this whole process here. And the working committee, which was the group of individuals who worked with the board to draft the original resolution, was able to meet together with the Winters Group and made some decisions based on the discussions that we had with the Winters Group. The first was looking at phase 1, which is strategy number 1, listening sessions with Black and African American employees. And we determined to break that work into two specific elements. One was just listening sessions, which we had begun in April and will continue through September. And the second was looking at also in the listening process to create solution sessions. And those solution sessions would then be things that we would be able to combine and work with the Winters Group to expand their scope of work, in which they were currently doing focus groups with cross-section of employees throughout the district, and to add additional opportunities for focus groups directly with Black and African American employees. So we will continue with that work, which will begin in August and September here. Next is we would look at all the feedback that we're getting from focus groups and look at how that would be integrated into the winter group's long-term recommendations. The other elements of strategy we were looking at with the Winters Group is in looking at our Phase 2 work, in which we have items that are not directly related to the D&I master plan, and looking at how we could, as staff is beginning to create solutions for that or look at different options for that, taking those options and providing that feedback to the Winters Group so that we can get some, have the benefit of their expertise in these areas to look at our potential plans and be able to work with us to refine those plans as we also grab specific feedback from them and then present that feedback back to the board for additional actions. And then in Phase 3, we would be taking all the recommendations from the Winters Group that they're providing through their existing D&I master plan process and evaluate all of the overlaps between the Racial Equity and Justice Project and then figure out how we can integrate those into a single working plan so that we can maximize the efforts between both of the projects. The other thing we discussed is looking at the key roles of the project. In the Racial Equity and Justice Project, we presented to you last time a structure that we would use in order to make sure that we were continuing to make progress on all the work in the strategies. But in looking at and comparing the work between the Racial Equity and Justice Project and the D&I Master Plan, we determined that one of the things that would be beneficial was to add a steering committee, which would comprise of the general manager, the HR manager, and the union representatives from each of the 4 unions that we're working with, to create an oversight group that would be able to help us with blending the work together of both efforts to ensure that both projects are progressing and that we're making the best opportunities of combining work and looking at overlaps and synergies between both efforts. The senior manager advisory teams would remain in place. Those would be working specifically on each of the 8 strategies. Task forces that would work with the senior manager advisory teams for each of the strategies. And then employee focus groups to be used in addition to the focus groups established by the Winters Group. But in this case, employee focus groups that are opportunities for the groups of the senior manager and advisory team and task forces to have employees who are not directly working on the projects, but to also have a voice in both vetting approaches and strategies as we're moving forward. So to date, the actions that we have continued to work on, we have done the formation of the SMT advisory group for Strategy 1. As I mentioned earlier, Strategy 1 had begun in April with the beginning of our wellness check-ins, in which we were providing employees opportunity to check in and talk about how they're dealing with current events. But what we've done is now is formed the SMT advisory group, and the goal of that group would be look at sustainability of creating additional opportunities for listening sessions and how that would work in our overall strategy of employee engagement overall. Second, we've been working with the Black Employee Network, having group discussions. Those discussions have been internally facilitated and have several sessions over the last couple of weeks that have given employees an opportunity to talk when those sessions will continue to move forward. Next is the Diversity Committee Roundtable. The Diversity Committee, which is part of our existing diversity inclusion efforts, that group has met together, and the group has now been briefed on the work of the Racial Equity and Justice Project. And again, the opportunities for looking at ways we can partner and work together on all of the projects towards the same outcomes were discussed. And then on project staffing, our recruitment for the limited term senior human resource analyst has continued. The external recruitment has closed, and we will be in the process of reviewing applications and getting into the interview process over the next 2 weeks. And finally, in bringing teams together of individuals working on racial equity and justice and the diversity and inclusion master plan, is we've done a project analysis to look for those overlaps and look for the best opportunities we have for partnership between the projects. Also included in this is, again, the progress of the diversity inclusion master plan. And the Winters Group has conducted the intercultural development inventory, which is called the IDI assessment. That inventory was given in order to help bring some clarity and to provide feedback from employees on how we're doing organizationally in terms of cultural competence. That was completed by 115 employees. Then we have also completed the initial 2 rounds of foundational courses from the Winters Group, where we had 67 internal stakeholders that completed the training, and training was also delivered to the senior management team. So our current project schedule looks like this. As I mentioned, we've broken this down into 3 phases. Phase 1 we are currently actively working on, which is our district listening sessions. And strategy 2 will actually be part of both phase 1 and phase 3. It's becoming part of phase 1 in that we're expanding the scope to include feedback sessions and focus groups that are led by the Winters Group for Black and African American employees. So they were planning to do a traditional cross-segment of employees. What we've done is work with them to expand so that they're creating additional opportunities and additional focus groups, which the focus will be talking directly to Black and African American employees as part of phase 1. So in phase 2, we're looking through the months of August and September to launch our phase 2 strategies, which is our strategy 6, which is responding to racism to district employees by customers. Strategy 7, which is a review of internal security protocols. And strategy 8, which is engaging law enforcement partners with conversation regarding use of excessive force and their current exercising of their own procedures in those areas. Phase 3 will begin as the Winters Group is completing their internal assessment with the district. As that assessment is completed and they begin making recommendations, we will then begin working with them to look at how strategy 2, 3, 4, and 5 will integrate with their diversity inclusion master plan efforts. So the feedback that we're getting from employees right now, we can best characterize it as a kind of a spirit of realistic optimism. And in that case, the realism and the acknowledgement from employees that everybody recognizes the amount of work that needs to be done and the amount of effort that will go into actually activating these principles and strategies from the resolution. And then most people are very optimistic in terms of seeing effort by the board and the commitment of the board and of staff in moving the project forward and continuing to give an emphasis to these areas. So our next steps that we're working on, we will continue to work on strategy 1, as mentioned earlier. The next steps will also include the launching of our phase 2 strategies. We mentioned strategy 6, 7, and 8. Those will be launched within the next month and a half here. We will be completing the recruitment process for the limited term senior human resource analyst. As I mentioned, we have closed the recruitment. We have a number of applicants, and we will be doing a review of those applications and interviews very soon. Also, we'll be working to coordinate our efforts with the Winters Group. Right now, we have a meeting scheduled with the Winters Group as beyond their existing scope to talk more specifically about the focus groups that they'll be doing with Black and African American employees. And the Winters Group will continue to be continue with their internal assessment with, again, continued assessments and also core training for the core team, which will be an extension of what they've already done for the senior management team and some of the stakeholders. And then we'll be working on regular staff communication for all employees. So what we'd like to do today is continue to have two-way discussion with the board. And that is, we'd like to get some feedback on a couple of items here. Number one, we'd like to get your feedback on the schedule that we presented to you in terms of how we're making progress and what we're keeping as focus points. The second thing we'd like to do is get some sense from you about our approaches to take the Racial Equity and Justice Program and the Diversity Master Plan projects separate but coordinated efforts. And then third, we'd like to get some more feedback from you on your thoughts on building a sustainable process for listening to employees, which is where we're taking strategy one with our long-term efforts here. So with that, I'd like to open up for any discussion that you have.
Okay. So I have, I had some weird pop-up. Oh, there it goes. Any board members that want to kick it off? Doug?
Sure, I'll kick it off. So I like what I'm seeing. The questions I have, from our level, there's a lot of feedback, focus groups, sessions and stuff. Is there a way for us to be able to, get some of that, sense of the discussions that are going on now, or the questions or concerns that are being raised, or things like that, so that we can be part of the feedback loop going forward and not wait for some big report or something at the end?
Yes, the Winters group will be providing some, as we're doing the focus groups, they will be providing some feedback that we can provide back to you as those sessions are happening. The sessions that have been done with the Black Employee Network have been more a sense of how people are feeling, and we have not prepared specific notes on those. But in general, I think there's a kind of a sense that there have been waves of emotion from people that they've dealt with. I think the initial shock of certain things touched people, but I think also the ongoing sense that that there's a validation of some feelings that people have in terms of dealing with race and dealing with factors around that. So I think there's quite a bit of again conversation about how people are feeling. As we get to the next phase and we're hearing more specific things and feedback, we'll be able to provide those to you before we go too far into the process. The secondary thing that we've also been receiving from employees is some employees have been submitting ideas that they have on things that can be done here at the district, and we can package those things and provide those to you as we're moving forward.
Good. I would just encourage that as this goes along, that we have a way of tapping into these discussions as we go.
And Doug, you have feedback on the, parallel and then coordinated approach of having our own internal work going forward, and not have. I think Winters Group had suggested that they take all of the work that we were proposing to do, and so there's a question to ask for feedback on that.
Yeah, I think a little of this, a little of that approach is probably a good one. I look at this, and again, my concern is this: wow, this looks like a huge body of work. I hope we don't get bogged down in a way that it either dissipates or there's a frustration with so much time being put onto it, or expectations coming out of it that it fails in some way. So actually, I think having a little of each is probably a good idea. I like that.
Who's up next? Lisa.
Hi. Question. Why? There must be a reason that the General Counsel's office is not a part of the steering committee. That's a question.
I don't have a specific answer to that. We do have, in the work that will be happening on individual groups, we do have already some volunteers from OGC that will be participating in different areas. But for the steering committee, I don't have a specific answer for that. So.
I think it's essential that the General Counsel's office is involved in this from beginning to end. I just think it's necessary, and I would like to make that request. Secondly, when we're talking about feedback from our Black and African American employees, are we going to get feedback as well from our non-African American and Black employees? Because, I mean, they're part of this entire process, and I think it's very important that we hear from them as well as part of this process.
Yes, Strategy 2 will be worked, which the Winters Group will be launching. We'll have focus groups with all employees, so all employees will be connected to that conversation. Also, one of our SMT members has been approached by another one of our affinity groups about ways that they can also set up listening sessions as well. So I think there's both a demand and opportunity for expanding what we're doing.
That's wonderful, because we've got to hear from everyone within our organization if we're going to really get to the nitty-gritty of all of this. So I'm happy to hear that. When it comes to the Diversity and Inclusion Master Plan and our racial and equity justice, I think it's fine that they run on separate tracks, so to speak. They're going to move along themselves, but I guess what you're asking is that they won't intertwine. Is that the purpose for the question?
No, I think that the question, if I understand it, is that it's to get a sense from the board about whether we think the work of the two things is sufficiently different and distinct that there's the work is that the racial justice, looking at our own racism as an organization, is different than necessarily how we do diversity and inclusion, right? They're not. They're connected, obviously, but they're different analyses.
Is that why we're being asked this question?
Yes, we're primarily asking the question largely in part to what Director Young is mentioning, but also
it's so hard to hear.
Oh, I'm masked. Let me get a little closer to the microphone here. In large part, it is directly along the line as President Young was mentioning. The secondary part of this is that we've presented you with these three phases that we're working on, in that we have one body of work that we feel is separate, and one body of work that we feel does directly intertwine. And so what we're looking for is what we're looking at organizationally the same as the board is actually viewing this project. Really, we're looking for alignment and to make sure that we're aligned in expectation as we're moving forward.
All right, thank you.
And Director McIntosh.
To ponder that.
Director McIntosh, this is Craig Spencer, and I understand your concern about OGC being on the steering committee, and we'll make sure that that's taken care of.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it.
Others? Frank?
Brief comment.
Got Andy.
I think that, these two things can proceed on a parallel track, but they got to kind of touch base with one another regularly, or they, instead of being parallel, they'll diverge, and so that's a concern to me. Secondly, and Marguerite, I want to address this to you because you've been a leader on this for the board. Would it be useful, or should board members be available for meeting or participating in meetings from time to time as part of our show of support, but also part of our participation?
I think that's it. I don't know if there's any reason that we could not be, as long as we're in keeping with the numbers. Craig, if you have an opinion on that? As long as we stay under quorum numbers?
Right. So yeah, standard quorum would apply. So you have to have less than 4. We have concerns about basically what would be a standing ad hoc committee. Once you have one for unlimited duration in a broad sense, that becomes actually a standing committee that then everything has to be done in public. So we can give you some guidance on that. But I think to have some involvement along the way at various points is okay, but just not as a routine matter. But we can take a look at that.
Yeah, if you could provide us some guardrails of to what level of involvement, like, if, Frank or I or Lisa wanted to drop in on into a focus group that was happening, or, something like that, to what when does it start to become like a serial meeting, or what, that would be very helpful, because I think some of us would like to be,
Yes.
more engaged and more in touch with the process.
Yes, we've done some research on that, so we can get that to you in short order.
Great.
Yes.
And specifically, Marguerite, I'm looking at, the board helped provide the start for this, thanks to what you engaged us in, but we want to continue to show the board's got resolve towards this, that we want to help this along but not take it over.
Well, right, and I would say that the other thing that we need to be conscious and examining is the ways in which we as a board have perpetuated racism in the organization. So there's difficult discussions within our own body that may need to happen.
Thank you.
So I think I had Bill and Andy, and I'm not sure in what order.
Andy, you want to speak? I'm ready.
Sure. I'll be brief. I think the comments from Lisa and Frank summarized the points that I would have been focusing on. So I don't need to repeat those. I'll just associate myself with what Lisa and Frank discussed. I also, in thinking about what the General Counsel's office can offer, I think a perspective on the civil justice system and its role, what it is and what it isn't, and how that connects with resources that we would or wouldn't provide. I think that those are roles that I think would be part of what would be helpful. I think there's other roles as well. But I did notice that there was a reference to law enforcement. I interpreted that as a reference to the criminal justice system. But I did want to also mention that I think the relationship of racial justice and equity to the civil justice system is important to be discussed in this process as well.
I just wanted to mention in passing that over the last few weeks, I've been invited to several Zoom meetings. ILWU, Wellstone Democratic Club, John George Democratic Club, East Oakland Democratic Club, all of them on subjects closely related to what we're talking about. I think the George Floyd created an opportunity, and there are a lot of groups that have moved ahead. What I was trying to do was be part of that scenario, at least in talking about the situation, and how long that opportunity is going to be there, I don't know. But I do know that we need to take advantage of it, because we have a large segment of the young population that is very, very involved. and a little bit of guidance, sharing a little bit of wisdom, not stopping them from whatever they want to go, but making sure that they're on solid ground has been my position in the matter. I recently requested from Risha a copy of our 35-190-20. I did that because the resolution I'm going to be talking about with the Oakland branch NAACP. There are opportunities there with a lot of young people, again, and letting them know what EBMUD is doing right now. We're also doing things inside to strengthen and make our unit organization embedded in these things. And that's great. But people don't always know what we're doing. That's the role I try to play with my constituency, to keep them informed and updated, because we're ahead of a whole lot of government organizations and even private industry organizations. And so it's good that we have this platform right now, and working from within and the external that we bring to the picture for the ones we represent is so important. So I just wanted to stress that and say I think we're on the right course. I'm taking advantage of an opportunity to talk to the winners group, to try to bring some of my past experience forward. I had a couple of incidents since we last met where organizations who have recognized me in the past, they don't even want to go through the formal process of endorsement. They say, you're our person. I think that's the standing that gives me that opportunity to talk about these things. And it's got nothing to do with my personal ego or anything like that. It's just trying to give foundational information that helps people on their way, not change their minds about anything, but make sure that, I think it was Willie Stargell that said it best, a little guidance through the minefield so that they don't make mistakes that have set people back in the past and they go on solid ground. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Great, thank you, Bill. It strikes me that we might ask Kelly and Public Information Office to look for additional opportunities to share what we're, the road we're embarking on with others throughout the district. And for those of us that are able to do board briefings this fall, which I know is not everyone, well, or maybe it is because there isn't, well, after August 18th, maybe everybody can do them. I don't know how that works, but that we include our racial justice and diversity inclusion work in our board briefings as well. I think would be, because they are events that are populated by electeds and other, local policymakers. Okay. Does anybody else want to go? John, do you have?
Sure. I'll just say in our Ledge Committee. Oops, am I on mute? I'm sorry. In our Ledge Committee today, we accepted. Well, we accepted them today.
Okay. Yeah, I think John, you're having some kind of connection difficulties, and I think everybody except me is gone, and I've interjected here and there. I think it's on the right track. I hope that we see some actions happening. To Frank's comment about,
I'm sorry, I turned myself off.
Comment about diverging. Is that I do think they're separate that a lot of it is separate paths of work, and part of the racial justice work or addressing, racism in our organization and how we relate to racism structurally in society is our work to do. It's not a consultant's work to do. Having a consultant who's helping us determine best practices for increasing diversity and inclusion and bringing those, I think that's really good consultant work to do. But I think the hard work is work that we've got to do. And so I like the way that we've got it set up right now. So I'll leave it at that. I appreciate everyone's comments. And Barry and everyone else who's working on this, appreciate you as well. And John, you wanted something to add in?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had my sound volume on the lowest level, and I pushed it, turning myself off. I had to join again. We did discuss this in the Ledge HR today, and we accepted both reports. We also gave, quite frankly, kudos to staff for running with this and making this happen. And as Frank talked about, Marguerite, you sort of kicked this off to a large extent. But staff has really listened, I think, to the board, and they need to be thanked for that. And I think with the process we're going through, we will end up in a heck of a lot better place in the future than we are today, and certainly we were in the past.
Well spoken. Okay, well, with that, Barry, do you have what you need from us in terms of feedback?
Yes, thank you all for your comments, and we've made plenty of notes here, and we'll be making modifications based on what you've recommended.
Great.
Derry?
Thanks a lot.
Derry?
Thank you.
Derry?
Thank you. My document went to sleep, so I need to open it back up again.
Just one more slide.
Yes.
I think we now have a coronavirus update from Dave Briggs.
Well, but before we do that, Derry had one more slide. It was really just to queue up some an item for you to think about for our next update in September. So this is for a future discussion in September, but just to frame it for you, to give you some time to think about it.
Yeah, the question we wanted to pose to you is really in looking forward. We are going to be doing a lot of work on a lot of things, but we'd like to have you your input on really what kind of specific outcomes would you envision as a board for the organization. So when we're looking at both of these projects working together, both the master plan and the racial equity and justice projects, we would really like to be able to identify some real tangible items that we all like to see as outcomes that we're targeting. So again, that's for a future discussion, but we want to at least plant that with you now for all of you to be kind of considering what those things would be.
Great.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Derry.
Thank you.
So now we're on our next update to give you an update on our COVID-19 response, and Dave Briggs will give that update.
Good afternoon, President Young. Good afternoon, members of the board. I'll briefly go over our coronavirus update here and the district's response during the pandemic. And a good place to start is a review of the county orders. This really does form the foundation of what we do here at work with a lot of our protocols. So, and the good news here is that by and large, these restrictions that have been out there by the county have more or less been static in terms of how they would impact the district. There's certainly been revisions that have fine-tuned restrictions for businesses and face covering protocols, et cetera, but probably the biggest thing that's happened in the last couple of months has been late last month, Contra Costa County put out an order that established a fining mechanism for those that are not adhering to or wearing a face covering out in public. They're not the only county that has done that, but they're the only county in our service area that has. Alameda County is still of the mind that their form of enforcement is education. They're not moving down this path yet. At the district, however, we've made it abundantly clear with employees that the face coverings and all the safety protocols are real and they must be followed, and that discipline will be pursued for those who were willfully neglecting these instructions. So that has been made very clear to staff. Over in Alameda County, Calaveras County, San Joaquin counties, by and large, as the pandemic has gone on, the orders from these counties are far less prescriptive than what we see in the Bay Area. But that being said, sadly, some of the numbers in these counties are going through the roof right now, particularly San Joaquin County. So that may not change. That may change. Some of these orders from these counties might get a lot more prescriptive. Nothing new out of the governor's office, and so that has more or less set the stage for where we are right now.
Dave, this is John Coleman. I have a quick question on the previous slide, if I can ask it.
Sure.
So in Contra Costa County, I'm going to speak specifically about the Lafayette Reservoir, and I've been sending Clifford the emails I get. And there's a couple people in particular who send me updates on 75% compliance, 50% compliance. When somebody is outside under the county ordinance in Contra Costa walking around the reservoir, are they obligated to wear a face covering or not?
No.
So I believe if you're out in public and you're recreating and you're more than, I'd say, 6 feet away from a person, you're not obligated to wear a face covering. But if you find yourself in close proximity to others, you need to have it at the ready and around your neck so that you can quickly put it on. But if you're jogging and you're away from other people, I think most counties say that is one of the exclusions.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So we've been doing this for 5 months. We're prepared to do it another 5 months or longer. And this first bullet here, in terms of the impact of our operations, addresses the impact to customers, which follows pretty closely aligned to some of the remarks that Marlene was making a moment ago. The number of non-payment accounts has remained in that 7,000 to 7,500 range for the last couple of months, but depending on what we may or may not see out of the federal government in the next couple of months, we're anxiously awaiting to see, and this is really the barometer that we will measure the impact on our customers, is when if more relief does not come from the federal government, we'll see it here. And so we're anxiously monitoring this. Our water demand remains high relative to last year. We're a few percent above last year. Most businesses are operating. The population is the same, so this isn't a surprise. The lost time due to the pandemic has been stable, and actually the first half of August has been pretty good. I'm not going to make any predictions about the second half of August, but so far we've had a good August. We do not have any employee right now under quarantine, and prior employees who were positive and had to isolate have all returned to work. We have a few people who are symptomatic and a few people who are waiting for results or consulting their doctor, but by and large, things are stable, and we've actually had a good August so far compared to July. To underscore that point, we still have no positives in our water and wastewater operator class. The public safety power shutoffs, as I've mentioned before, that will be another challenge, but I don't think it'll be a problem. It'll be manageable, and the reason for that is that the staff that will be very intensely busy for a few days during the duration of a PSPS event are by and large not the same staff who are intensely busy right now managing the marathon of this pandemic. The supply chain remains unaffected. It has been that way the whole time, and by this I mean the major commodities such as chemicals and fuel we've not had a problem. Our personal protective equipment is actually up to 12 weeks now. We just received a shipment of sanitizer from California Office of Emergency Services that has now got us to 12 weeks of supply. We're literally storage limited at this point. We can't really house any more PPE at this point without more storage space. Last week I conducted sort of a poll survey, a straw poll with Contra Costa Water District, Alameda County Water District, San Francisco PUC, and by and large the profile that's painted by all these bullets on the upper end of the slide, we're more the norm. We're not the exception. Most water utilities in the Bay Area are by and large in the same boat. They're having a stable time, although it's incredibly challenging. They're having a stable time through the pandemic so far. Dave, John again. Back to your first bullet. I'm glad that our non-payment accounts have remained stable. I guess I have a little bit of a concern looking long-term if this continues. Two different people I know in two different industries were laid off yesterday, ratepayers. And now that many companies that got the federal loan/grant have exhausted that money, and if there's not new money coming, there's likely to be, during this pandemic, if it's not stabilized, which it's not soon, we're going to see more businesses impacted in our service area, thus people's jobs being impacted, more layoffs. The state's now got 2 days a month you have to take it off without getting paid, and that's starting to happen in the private sector as well. So we should expect to see the non-payment accounts probably increase in the next quarter.
Not to mention the lack of the $600 a week unemployment check.
Right. So
that's happening. So.
There's a lot going on. So my concern is, I'm grateful that our non-payment accounts have remained stable. I'm not going to count on that in the next quarter to a half a year, based on looking at what the numbers are coming out of jobs, employment, and income into families. And we should be prepared for that.
Yeah, Director Coleman, I think we share that concern precisely. And we don't necessarily think that the past is a prediction of the future, by no means.
Okay.
So I'm on slide 3 or 4, I guess. So working at the district, let's see. Last spring, we had a lot of change. Change is hard, right? So we shut down construction, and then we ramped it back up again. We sent hundreds of employees home very quickly in a matter of days to begin telecommuting. We implemented dozens of safety rules and started using terms that we had never used before. So all of this was very active in the springtime. Luckily, things have calmed down in the summer. That doesn't mean it's not challenging. It's still very challenging, but we at least have some regularity to our work environment, and that has helped. Of course, telecommuting continues. The additional paid leave that the board has made available for those individuals that need to quarantine upon direction by the district if they're exposed at work has been very helpful, and that supplemented the federal leave. We communicate with our customers and interact with them in new ways. We've adapted. Customers used to have the ability to come into the building and pay their bill in cash. They can't do that anymore. So now we have a customer can pay in cash in any MoneyGram location. We do not. We still attend to customer complaints and calls by going and visiting them at their residence, but we stay outside. We stay 10 feet away. They respect that. They're still getting the attention. They're still getting their concerns addressed, but we're not going in their house, and we're staying away from them, and that, by and large, has been greatly appreciated. Our field work continues. Construction continues, albeit it's less efficient. You just can't work as fast as you used to work when you've got to disinfect your tools, when you can't carpool to the job site, when you've got to wear a face covering and stand 6 or 10 feet away from somebody that you normally used to stand right next to and put your hands on the same object. So things have slowed down, but by and large we're managing and work continues. And as the board also is aware, we're actively working with employees that have school-age children to figure out what we can do to ease the burden of distance learning, which for a lot of people started yesterday. And I anticipate we're going to have another vigorous conversation about this at tomorrow's senior management team meeting. And
Dave, could you just just talk a little bit about, when you say actively working on options to help employees, what are the help us understand what some of those options are being implemented.
We've got a few.
Is there any distinction between field staff and admin staff in that regard?
Well, you're right. There's certainly more options available to the admin staff than there are to the field staff, and that's why we've really tried to focus on helping them as well. But what we have in the bag right now are various forms of flexible work schedules that need to be consistent and aligned with labor law and the MOUs. So Laura's looking very closely at that, and we're going to explore that. And flexible work schedules can mean you start at a different time, you work different days, you work a different number of hours in a day. So it could mean many things. We're looking at hosting a platform where employees can exchange needs and resources, be it mentoring or teaching or childcare, what have you. We are also looking at different extended leave without pay options, but that's what we've got so far. And I think we can really make some progress with the flexible work schedules, and that would particularly affect those field workers if we can put Saturday and Sunday, which doesn't always work for a variety of reasons, but if we can put Saturday and Sunday on the table, that frees up Monday and Tuesday. So just rounding out here with the last slide, we've had 12 confirmed positives of our employees, plus one contractor. That's actually true through, what's today, August 11th? I checked this morning. So through today, we still have 12, plus one with a contractor. As the board knows, we can control community transmission at work by our rules, by our employees' good behavior. We can limit if the virus spread, if it does get to work. We have people at the ready to support HR staff if the caseload grows. Right now, it's stable, and I'm hesitant to say it's actually decreased, but I don't want to jinx things. And we've had our employee hotline available for about a week now, which has made things a little bit easier for folks. So it's challenging, but it's stable, and I'll take any questions from here.
What is our testing turnaround time? Are we getting us back in a fast fashion, or are we waiting a week or more like everybody else?
So that will vary depending on what site you get tested at. I believe, and this has evolved over time, it also depends on how busy they are. I believe most sites, if you are symptomatic and clearly potentially have or exhibiting all the symptoms of COVID-19, I believe your results will return faster. If you're on the other end of the spectrum, where you're just trying to check, you're just trying to keep, you just want to know, you have no reason to believe you have it, you have no symptoms. I got tested 2 weeks ago, I waited 10 days. So it really, I think it varies. I think you can find a place. Of course, you can always get it done through a private lab and have it done faster for a couple $100. But if you go to the free locations in Alameda and Contra Costa County, I believe if you are symptomatic and your doctor is worried or your healthcare provider is worried, you can get results back in a matter of days.
Is that what you have for us?
That's all I have today.
Questions from other board members? I have one question, and it relates to the public comment made by Eric about our capacity to fill vacant positions in HR, especially for efforts that require testing, and how is that being impacted by what we're going through here? Because it's concerning to me that we have that many vacant positions just in our 444 unit. So
maybe I can.
Do you want me to take that, Dave?
No, Laura. Maybe I'll take a first shot, and then you can fill in. So, pre-COVID, when we looked at certainly on the operations and maintenance side, we historically had about 50 vacancies probably in the local 444 just because of the amount of churn that we get within the staff. COVID-19 has certainly slowed down certain classifications that require testing. That's been difficult to figure out how we do the testing. But the other thing that we saw that's not related to COVID is we've seen a lot of retirements with the superintendents, the supervisors, quite a lot, probably a little over a dozen. And that also creates a cascading effect of 444 employees getting promoted up. So that's happened recently. I've seen lots of retirements in the supervisory ranks, which also resulted in promotions and then created vacancies. So, but we'll summarize all this in the memo that the board asked for earlier. But Laura, do you want to add to this?
Just a little bit. One of the things, just to give you an example of what we've been trying to adjust to, is For the larger recruitments for like plumber and things like that, where we're used to getting 1,000 applications, is we would rent a facility outside the district and test on the weekend hundreds of people at a time, and we can no longer do that. We're limited to testing 12 people at a time. So right now, staff is working all day Saturday, all day Sunday to do shift after shift after shift of testing to try to get through those larger recruitments. So that's one example of what has slowed us down. And we're still trying to figure out, say, for example, the heavy truck driver, where we usually have an employee in the cab with the candidate driving around to see how they drive, which doesn't seem like a safe thing to do. So we're looking at contracting. We have a contract with a driving school who can administer that. So those are just some examples of what we've been adjusting to try to keep these going. We did just have our first field test for carpenter. In the new, safer way to do it, and that went fine. So it looks like we're able to start moving forward on some of those performance tests now.
Okay, thank you. I'll look forward to the information memo. Hey, anything else?
That's it for COVID, unless there are other questions.
Anything else on board? Okay, and then the last item, again, my screen went.
Two more items, President Young. So the next one is to appoint an ad hoc committee to negotiate an amendment to the General Counsel's employment agreement. And President Young, would you like to lead this discussion?
Yeah. I'm sorry, my screen keeps like going blank just as we're about to move to the next thing. So I would like to appoint myself, Doug. And then I'll take a volunteer to work through Lisa, thank you. Is that it? That's a volunteer? That's a hand raised? Great. Okay. And we will actually plan, Risha, if we can add a short closed session to our August 18th special meeting for the three of us to meet.
So it would actually be the full board meeting to discuss with the three ad hoc members what the decision is.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay.
All right. So I need a motion. I'll move that we establish an ad hoc committee, composed of myself, Doug, and Lisa McIntosh, and that we meet with the full board in closed session on August 18th.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Director Coleman. And roll call or any discussion? Okay.
Only if Doug doesn't wear a tie.
Doug's get to decide or not whether to wear a tie.
You ready?
Yeah,
for the
roll call, please.
Okay. Director Coleman?
Yes.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director Linney?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
President Young?
Yes. Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Clifford, you have a monthly report for July.
Yes, so attached to your board pack is a monthly report, and I can answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for our general manager? If you do, you know how to find him. And that brings us to committee reports. The July 28th Sustainability and Energy Committee, as well as the Finance Administration Committee meetings, were reported on our last meeting and are included in the agenda packet. We'll now get reports from the Planning Committee and from the Legislation HR Committee, although they kind of reported already. So, Doug, if you have a report from Planning.
Planning Committee had 5 items today with regarding to Los Vaqueros Reservoir expansion, update on the East Bay Shore Recycled Water Project, update on the lead services lateral inventory and replacement plan, update on the wastewater treatment plant odor control program, and an information technology security annual update. No votes were taken on any of the items. They were all updates.
Okay, thank you. And John, do you have anything to add from Ledge HR that you hadn't already reported on?
Just we dealt with items 13 and 14 that were on the board agenda today.
Okay, great. On to item 16, which is other items for future consideration. If you have items for future consideration beyond those discussed today, please submit them to the general manager. Item 17, director comments. Does anyone have comments that they would like to share today that they didn't already get a chance to do during the meeting? Frank.
Guy in the Hawaiian shirt. I see he's waving.
Two things. First of all, congratulations.
Without a tie.
Well, my iPad's running out of power, and on my stand, so I got to plug it in.
Okay.
Anyway, congratulations to Doug, Bill, and Lisa on their successful campaigns. And secondly, I don't know about you all, but I had these funny little messages from Apple concerning whether or not I'd be able to use my iPad or not. Take those seriously and talk to the IT department if you received them, because they go through a process that took me about 20 minutes to go through. And it was painless, but it was still time consuming. So I urge you to take a look at that. That's it.
Pick up your own Apple ID on the iPad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I wound up having to get a new ID for purposes of Apple to be able to continue to use my iPad for East Bay Mud Business.
Cool. Okay, yeah, I think all of us have been getting those messages. All right. I dealt with mine. Any other director comments?
Yes, Madam President, I wanted just to say on last Sunday, I was invited to be a speaker at a commemoration program for the late Representative John Lewis. Mm-hmm. It was given by the Oakland branch NAACP. And there were a number of speakers. I didn't think they would call on me, but I met and knew John. Matter of fact, I was at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, where they had his body in state. It just brought back a lot of memories. East Bay Mud sent me to the 50th commemoration of the Civil Rights Act in Washington, D.C. And John was there as one of the speakers and presenters. Going back that far and having that privilege of knowing a person like him is quite an honor. I don't want to belabor our time today, but I do want to say how supportive the district has been of me and of my past work, and making sure that I got certain places at certain times. I just wanted to share that to say what a privilege and honor it was to know John. He was a guy who didn't forget anybody. If everybody had a memory like that, it would be something to write about. But Oakland branch did a nice job. Mayor Libby Schaff, Representative Barbara Lee, just a number of people were on that program, and I just felt honored being there. And I tried to bring the best of East Bay Mud into that setting by preliminarily speaking about what we're doing. And I think that gives us a chance now to stand out in a way that we haven't been able to in the past. And now East Bay Mud takes a leadership role. Madam President, I want to thank you for your contributions to that end, and certainly my colleague Lisa McIntosh. That's it.
Thank you, Bill. I think you might rival the late Congressman Lewis in your ability to remember remember people and remember the stories that go along with them. So, I'm glad the district's been able to support your efforts to make good trouble. So, with that, the board will hold a special meeting on Tuesday, August 18th to exercise its AB 408 authority to consider the direct appointment of our incumbent directors, wards 1, 5, and 6, Director McIntosh, Linney, and Patterson, who did not field opponents or any other candidates to run for those seats. The August, and that will include a special closed session as well. The August 25th regular meeting of the board has been canceled, and the next regular meeting will be held on Tuesday, September 8th, 2020 at 1:15 p.m. Our meeting is now...
Marguerite,
Yeah.
before you adjourn, I just thought of one thing I'd like to mention. The fact that I heard you say all three of the sitting board members, none of them have been challenged by other candidates, is kind of a pretty cool thing. And I think just pausing for a moment to reflect on staff's work and the board's work and everything, I think that shows, for the most part, a satisfied constituency and a set of customers that didn't come at us with torches and pitchforks.
Feathers.
Lisa, Bill, and I count ourselves lucky to not have to go through the democratic process of being reelected. But I think
we have to decide on the 18th. We still have to decide to do that on the 18th.
They're really excited about it or not. We don't have to go through the election, so. Point still remains. I appreciate all the work that all of our employees do.
He's got to get rid of the tie, doesn't he, John?
He does, otherwise he's a no voter.
I appreciate all the work that all of our employees do.
All right, he's got my vote. There, yay.
Okay, so we will convene on August 18th to consider the good fortune of our fellow board members, whether or not they should have to stand before the voters in November. The meeting is now adjourned.